Hello, and welcome to this month's episode of Hyperfocus Hour, brought to you by John, myself, the host, and Via Resource, an information and cybersecurity recruitment specialist that operates in the UK, the US, Asia, and Europe. This month, we have Leanne Maskell, who is the founder of ADHD Works, a coaching service offered to neurodivergent and ADHD people to help better equip them in the work environment and to bring awareness to ADHD overall. Is also the author of ADHD and A to Z, which is a wonderful tool used by many ADHD and neurodivergent people to better equip them to successfully work in a working office environment. So, Leanne, thank you so much for coming on this month. I can't wait to discuss what it means to have ADHD, what that looks like, and how we as ADHDers can utilize tools to help us be more successful in the office place and work overall. So again, thank you, Leanne, for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really great to talk to you.
I have one question for you today. ADHD tax, you know what that is, obviously, or at least I'm assuming. What was your most recent ADHD tax?
Well, there's a woman in my course who she said that she two people. One of them, I saw that she was running an ADHD retreat, so I impulsively bought it. And then before she passed me, I was like, I want to go on a retreat. I never get to go. I run ADHD retreats, so I was like, I never get to go on them. So I bought her retreat. And then another person that did my course said that she made this. It's called the Neurodivergence Journal by Lizzie Summerfield, the New Deal for Neurodiversity. That's what she runs.
Okay.
She's amazing. And I bought two of them. I got two things in the post and I was like, oh, great. And then realized I bought her book 2 times and forgotten the first time I booked it. And I bought one. I was like, okay, at least I got 2 journals now. Yeah, so those things.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I promised my partner I was not going to mention this. So when she listens to this, she's going to be like, why did you say this for the 4th time in a row? But I did the exact same thing a few months ago. I bought a Lego set and totally forgot that I bought it. And then, 2 weeks later, it showed up at my doorstep and I was like, ooh, free Lego.
Yeah, it's great. It's not too expensive. Buck is very reasonably priced. It was kind of a nice and funny surprise. I was like, that's ironic. I got 2 neurodivergent journals for myself.
Yeah. To be fair, that's a bit more useful than some few hundred pieces of plastic.
But you can never have too much Lego.
No. I have a 4-foot long Lego set. It's the Star Destroyer from Star Wars. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, it's
That sounds very useful to me.
It's totally useful. It wasn't way too much money, and it doesn't just sit in the corner because it can't be played with. But and that was probably the biggest impulse buy I've ever done, and I have absolutely no regrets about it.
Yeah. My friend accidentally bought a year's worth of toilet paper at the start of the pandemic, but it was before the pandemic happened. So she was like, you need to come over to my house and get toilet paper, because she was like, I've accidentally ordered this huge box of toilet paper. And then the pandemic hit 2 months later and people were like panic buying toilet roll from the shops. It was so, I was like, see, we actually are predicting the future here. These things are useful, we just don't know why at the moment.
That eventually becomes useful.
Yeah, who could have predicted, eh? Oh. Toilet paper, the hottest commodity.
Honestly, yeah, I remember when it was just all like the shelves. It was all dry and everything. It was like that for months. It was months. I don't miss those days. I don't miss those days.
Could have really used a year's supply of toilet paper that you accidentally bought 3 months early. I wouldn't mind. Best buy ever.
I wouldn't mind accidentally buying a year's supply of like beer or like whiskey or something. But then that probably wouldn't be a year's supply. That'd probably last me like 3 months. I'd just be like, ooh, okay. Anyways, I have diverged a lot there. So obviously the point of this podcast is to discuss ADHD in the workplace. As for the listeners, you guys are obviously used to a more structured kind of podcast episode. This one specifically, I haven't structured because I wanted to see what would happen. So apologies if we go on to tangents and it's a bit hard to follow at times. Just bear with us. But Leanne, my first kind of big question that I was thinking, when it comes to a corporate setting, you've done talks at, I think, Disney and a few other kind of big companies, right? So when you do those talks, what would you say are the three kind of big points about ADHD that you always try to hit on?
It depends on the company. But as
Fair.
a general one, I would say like the general trainings that I do are like understanding ADHD. So like actually explaining what it is and what it isn't, and how not everyone in the world has got ADHD. I usually share about my experience and how horrifically horrific my life was before I was diagnosed. But no, not just like a cute lost my keys kind of thing. But kind of like actually understanding what it is. So I'll go through like executive functioning impacts and like how it can show up in the workplace. The difference between like diversity. Sorry, this is not you. I've got ADHD myself, so they come under 3 bullet points. This is the first one: understanding ADHD. Like, yeah, the difference between like disability and diversity, and neurodiversity. Like breaking that down for people to actually understand it. In the coaching language, we call that like name it, tame it. So if you can't understand it and you feel scared talking about it, then it's hard to talk about. Next one is supporting ADHD. So like how you can actually support people that are neurodivergent in the workplace. And again, I kind of do it like by explaining how it shows up. So the kind of basic human to human interaction, like having policies in place for people to know how to get support or giving written instructions, but the fact that like everyone is different, so what works for one person won't work for everyone, but like maybe some kind of coaching skills of like how to talk to people without being like, oh my god, go to HR. Support and having like access to work. Again, I would say that is a really important one if someone's a company based in the UK, like because access to work can pay for people to get support like coaching, like administrative support. And then so we've got understanding, harnessing, and then the third one would be God, look at my ADHD. Third one is harnessing ADHD. So we've got understanding, supporting, and harnessing ADHD. So harnessing is all about like the strengths and the brilliant sides of being neurodivergent, because who wants everyone to think the same? All of the brilliant qualities that can come from it, and like how I like to think of it like if you have a plant that is dying, you don't check out the plant, you just put it in the right place or the right soil or whatever it is, and find out what that plant needs, and then it can thrive, right? And so that's pretty much it. It's like, why bother doing all of this in the first place? It was like I hear all the really nice benefits to helping people to have a good workplace.
And do you talk about like the difference in like what ADHD looks like in men and what it like what looks like in like women, kind of the differences there?
Yeah, again, it depends on the company and what they want.
Of course.
But essentially, like, you know, the fact most people would think ADHD, like I did when I was diagnosed, like connects to hyperactive little boys. There's so much terrible disparities in general in like access to healthcare, like people that are black or different racial backgrounds, and women and girls and all of the intersectionalities in between, trans people. There's like so many people that are denied support. Like, you know, 1 in 4 women have attempted suicide who have ADHD. I have lots of these facts, embedded in my brain now, so they kind of come out at random points when needed.
1 in 4 women with ADHD has attempted suicide.
Yeah,
that's insane. I didn't know that. That's insane.
Yeah, and 5 times higher risk of suicide for people with ADHD.
I didn't know that one.
More facts I should know about different backgrounds, but yeah, like it's so there's lots of. I wrote a book called ADHD and A to Z, and for that I tried to find facts and like research for every single chapter. Very painful process. Wouldn't recommend many chapters. Many facts, many chapters, very stressful, but and many like academic papers and stuff. But it was good because now they are like embedded in my brain, so they come out. But yeah, it's really, really bad. So like raising, and particularly that's what I meant about that first part, like, and especially in the workplace, where often I'll get asked to talk at companies being like, we want to hear about the superpower of ADHD and neurodiversity. And I'm like, oh, well, I actually almost died. I always tell this joke when I do corporate talks that no one ever laughs at. And I always say like, oh, basically I was diagnosed. I basically became extremely suicidal myself. But fortunately I've got ADHD, so not very good at following through, and then everyone kind of looks at me like, did she just say that? And then I'm like, no one ever laughs at this joke. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I didn't finish my stand-up comedy course, and then they laugh. So it's funny. Everyone can laugh at that. Yeah, it's not a norm. I did that recently at Deutsche Bank. And the Bank of America, they were like, what did she just say? But no, I tried to bring a bit more like human into it, and like make it a bit more accessible and less like corporate, because exactly, like I could go in and read stuff off Google and be like, ADHD is these things, but having had literally the lived experience myself, I tried to bring a bit of life to it.
I mean, I just awkwardly laughed when you mentioned that. Not wasn't like a voluntary one.
It's
It was
quite
just
funny.
like,
I think it's a good joke. No one likes it.
It's like mine was like I was shocked by that, so that's why I laughed. Like, oh,
thank you. But the good thing, like, because that is like a way of me expressing that and making it like a real life person that's standing in front of you, instead of just reading out a fact, but that's not very like tangible, but also without kind of dragging everyone down into my trauma. But making it really obvious, because I do think like neurodiversity can be great and there's lots of brilliant benefits to it, as I said, but in the wrong situations, without the right support, if you don't know, like I was 25 when I got diagnosed, and it's true, like I very much would not be here if I hadn't got that diagnosis. Really important. It's something I just try, I guess that's a big point I tried to hit on, which is like it's not something people are like making up, or like you can't get it from eating sugar. It's like it can be really serious if you don't get that help. So
and I think that's one of those things is there's so many people on like TikTok or Instagram, and there's one person in particular I can think of. I don't remember their handle, and I'm not going to blast their name or anything right now, but when I first started watching them on TikTok, I was like, oh man, like, this is so true. They really have that. They have ADHD. They get it. And I don't want to be the person that says, no, you don't have it. Unfortunately, as I've been watching it more and more, I'm starting to wonder, do they actually have ADHD? Most likely they do, but are they using hyperbole? Are they making it a bigger deal than they are than it? I don't want to say it's a bigger deal. You know what I'm trying to say, though. I hopefully at least. Like, are they trying to show to make it kind of a show to highlight it? But in doing it, it looks fake. It looks inauthentic. And then, from my perspective, at least from my opinion, when something like that happens, it exacerbates the issue of hyperactivity and impulsiveness and all of these stereotypes that we face on a daily basis. Because then people watch that and are like, well, you can only have ADHD if you were at that level, and that's not the case. I know tons of people who have ADHD, but it's quite mild. They don't need medication. They know they've done things in their life to help them kind of work through it. I need medication. If I don't have my meds, then I'll take a picture, send it to my girlfriend, and say, "Hey, can you help me with this?" And then 5 minutes later, she'll respond, and I'll have already forgotten what I was talking about. Like, that's me unmedicated. But it's just a shame that like that kind of stuff happens, and it exacerbates the issue. And then you have to go into, like you said, Deutsche Bank or Bank of America, and make this kind of like this joke, which isn't really a joke.
Yeah, I like it. That's why I quit my stand-up comedy course. They were like, you can't make people laugh at you. They were like, you can't use trauma. I was like, that's all I've got. I don't have anything else. But yeah, I get what you mean. But I think that's something I really struggled with when I became an ADHD coach, because I was inundated by people contacting me like non-stop, and I still am. Now we've got boundaries around how they can contact me, but like particularly from people that were like, oh, like I had a call once with someone. She said, I woke up in the morning, I read an article in the news about ADHD, and then she said, and then I went on social media and I saw this meme that said, if the things in your house don't have a home, it means you have ADHD. And I knew that was me. And then she called up a private psychiatrist like she googled it and then she booked a thing, paid £1,000, and within like by the time her partner had woken up, she was like, I guess what, I've got ADHD. And like she paid £1,000 for an assessment like a week later, and then she was on medication and she called me like, hi, what do I do? And I was like, and you know, I think it's really hard because it's not my place or your place or anyone's place to say whether someone has or hasn't. Like, you know, I often get told by people that I don't look like I have ADHD. Yeah, like before I had it, like got free books and very much like your workaholic ADHD. But at the same time, I can't like cook, stay alive, change the bed sheets, like basic human stuff. But also the internet and social media brings it's great because, again, fun fact, adults in the UK weren't able to be diagnosed until 2008. So there are so many people that like have been missed and like would, you know, like me, I was like, what? Well, I don't have ADHD. And I actually kind of only accepted the diagnosis from hearing a podcast where they talked about rejection sensitive dysphoria, where I was like, oh, there you go. But you know, like at the same time, I've heard from people like someone said that my book shouldn't talk about RSD because they were like, that's not academically verified. And I was like, well, and I ended up then going on my own RSD tangent and talking to the World Health Organization about how they should be recognizing this stuff. Maybe that's why women are killing themselves, eh? But
honestly,
but yes, I think the internet is like and that's again why I wanted to do like ADHD Works a lot, because to bring some kind of like help there, because the internet can just keep you, like I went through that myself when I was having a really tough time, like endlessly googling and scrolling and being like, I need to find out what I should do, what next. And like with coaching, we're sort of like, hey, sit down for a minute, we'll talk, like how does it affect you? Like the answer's not out there, they're like inside you, and like what does it mean for you, and how, you know, what do you want to do with this information? Whereas social media like is kind of what is it, like a show place, like people become like caricatures of themselves on social media. So, and if you're talking about something like mental health, neurodiverse, anything, then you end up like that's my third book. It's called The Reality Manifesto, which I actually wrote from going down this rabbit hole about social media, because I grew up modeling from like the age of 13. So it's basically when we start objectifying ourselves, like you can kind of then become, that's a lot again what I'm trying to do with ADHD Works, because I don't want to personally have to go and talk about my experiences every day to help other people. Like I don't want to have to objectify myself and my own experiences, but be able to like train up other coaches to coach people, so I'm not doing it all myself.
And I mean, if you're training up other people and they're going out and doing the same thing that you're doing as well, you're suddenly, it's not just you that's doing it. You're not like the sole vanguard or whatever you want to call it that's going out. You know, now you have a network, you have people that are dedicated and passionate about it that want to talk about it. It spreads more awareness than you could ever do by yourself, and I think that's great. It's and like you said, I mean, it hits on the RSD as well. The RSD is tough. It's really tough. I don't even know how else to say it. Like, you know, if I'll use an example. A few months ago, obviously as a recruiter, I send out emails and messages and stuff like that on LinkedIn all the time. And I sent out a message to one hiring manager, basically saying, "Hey, I know you're not hiring. Would love to have a conversation with you, just to see what your options are for the next six to 9 months, something like that." And I go back to my messages on LinkedIn probably 15 minutes later, and the guy had blocked me. He didn't even respond. He just straight up blocked me. And went and talked to I told my manager this, and he was like, "Oh, whatever, just move on." And I'm like, but I want to know why he blocked me. I'm upset. I was like, I'm actually upset. And it actually spiraled me. I was upset for the better part of probably 45 minutes to an hour, just like, what's going on? Why was I blocked? What did I ever do to this guy?
What was the thought that was causing you to be upset?
What was the thought that was causing me to be upset? The thought that was causing me to be upset was that I didn't feel like I deserved to be blocked. It was like you could have just, it was like, he could have just said no thanks. It just felt so unnecessary and just mean.
Yeah, because I don't know what other reasons could they have had for blocking you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing. It was like, yeah, that was it as well. Like, what other reason did he have to block me besides this one message? And I'd never had anyone block me before because of just the standard "I'm doing my job" message. It
But
was just so.
if you put yourself in, why do you think he did block you?
I think. Well, I thought about this, and I think he blocked me because I'm an annoying recruiter.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, like I can see that and be like, that's fair. But at the same time, my more rational part is like, but if that happened to me, I wouldn't block the person. I would just ignore them or, say no thanks.
Yeah. So, because basically, well, I was just going into coaching mode, coaching you on how I coach people around RSD, right? Because I remember you telling me this, and I was like, oh, I block people all the time. I always block, but I block people because I get like 100 messages a day, particularly on LinkedIn, particularly from people that like give me your stuff or like they want stuff. I also got a message from someone that was like, I've got quite a few of these kind of messages because to handle that we have like these kind of automated, not really, but template ones because I'll get people like trauma dumping, telling me all of their very intense trauma, asking for help. Like again, because the support isn't there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to reply to as many as possible, but like they want to have chats, want to do like it's so much to deal with myself. And then but I often get messages from people being like, I have rejection sensitive dysphoria because you sent me a automated response, like huge email being like, you shouldn't have that, and I'm like, I am not responsible for your feeling, like you. But yeah, it's how we try to coach people around RSD is like, it's basically identifying the thought, because often it's just like being punched in the chest kind of like trauma of like, everyone hates me, I'm never doing my job again, oh my god. But then if you can identify it to the thought and then see how it's affecting you, and then what I try to do when I'm coaching people is try to get them to actually imagine that they're like a lawyer for the other person, of being like, well, actually they did this because they've got like 150 messages a day, they didn't really take it, they didn't think, they just did it because they're like, busy, and they're just like, they would need the message out. So when I block people, it's just because I need that message out my inbox. I don't think they'll even notice. I'm just like, whether like, and trying to see it from their side, and then seeing the impact it's having on us, because usually then the impact it has on us makes us repeat that first thought, because we like self like confirm, and then kind of identifying a better thought to replace that with, that's not going to cause us the same, like, okay, like he's just busy, or like whatever, or like what is it, deserve to be blocked, like you can't, who can say whether you deserve to be blocked? Doesn't matter if you get blocked, but it's that he missed out by blocking. He missed out because he could have been on this podcast right now, but instead we're here talking about him.
I like to think he missed out. I'll never know. And the thing is, I don't even remember the guy's name at this point.
Yeah.
That's like, I had before this, I hadn't even thought about that in probably 2 or 3 months. And the last time I thought about it, I was just like, that was ridiculous. But
yeah, but like again, because that's how we try to coach people on it, is like, especially for me, once I understood it was real, and like for anyone listening that doesn't know, rejection sensitive dysphoria is a really, really intense emotional pain to real or perceived rejection that lasts for like a few hours. And the fact that really struck it for me was like, it's different from things like bipolar or borderline personality disorder, because it's always caused by something, like a thought or a look that someone gave us, and lasts for like a short period of time as opposed to like a few days. I've had a really awful fortnight of it now, ironically. But that really, so when I'm coaching people on that, always, like, I think just knowing it's real is like, oh, then you don't feel so mad, like you're not beating yourself up so much, because you're like, oh, this is happening. And then validating your own experiences. And as coaches, we really try to like do what I just did, but be a bit like valid in a way that's validating. So it's not like, oh no, you're being ridiculous. It's like, okay, what impact does it have? Like, do you want to have it? What are you going to do about it? Like, but your feelings are very valid, and he is mean, and it is really horrible to block people that you don't know, but like, so we accept it, and we're like, yeah, it is very, very valid. Because for me anyway, whenever I experience RSD, I'm like, oh, I'm being ridiculous, I need to get over it, what's the problem? And then it's kind of like a tornado. It's ironic that you opened this asking me about the corporate talks, because it's actually thanks to you that I do them at all, because I used to have such bad I used to have such bad rejection sensitive dysphoria around public speaking that I refused to basically do any of them. And I was just really, really, actually, I think it was after I had a talk where like, it was just the Zoom broke in the talk. It was like an online one. The Zoom kind of froze up and I didn't realize, and everyone was like, you were amazing. But afterwards I like cried in bed for like a week, and then I said, I'm not doing any more talks. And then it was only because you had suggested me to your company, and I was getting a lot of like requests from companies, but I just put my fees really, really high, and then they booked me, and I was like, no. I literally said to them on the phone, I was like, I put my fees really high because I don't really like doing talks, especially in person. Like, would never do one in person. And they were like, we would like to book you in person for £1 million. And I was like, can you not do that? But then doing it helped me to like get over the fear and to do it and to realize like it's okay, and to validate like it's like you can do it and not like end up in a puddle on the floor crying.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I guess you're welcome. I don't remember if I messaged you or if I just put like a comment down on a post or something. I honestly don't remember, but I've like I was talking to somebody about this recently and just thinking, because I think you mentioned this when I reached out to you for this podcast, you mentioned the same thing, and I was like, oh, I had absolutely no idea about this at all, and it's just it baffles me. It's baffling. It's very humbling as well, because I have a lot of respect for you. You do such great work, and to know that I had any kind of like impact on that, it's just like, oh, okay.
yeah, see, the guy that blocked you, maybe he will be feeling the same way. It's that thing, we never know what is going on in someone else's life, right?
Yeah.
Ever. And then to find out, we're like, oh, I didn't even no, it was the person that booked me said that you had suggested me to them to do the talk.
Oh, okay. Oh, it was somebody at the company that said I suggested them. Okay, that makes more sense now.
Thanks.
Wonder.
Yay.
You're very welcome. I mean, and now you're doing talks at like Disney and these massive companies,
literally.
and yeah, it's
crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's just crazy that it happens. So I mean, when it comes to like the RSD, and I'll just kind of dive into this. Like when it comes into the RSD and doing these talks with the companies, I assume you follow your own coaching and everything. For other people, let's say that either lead a team or have to run a meeting or something like that. What are some things that they could do if they have ideas or something like that's maybe shot down in the meeting?
Oh yeah, I feel your pain. First of all, write a book. Take all the
Write a book.
ideas and put them into yourself. That is my experience personally, of my general experiences of having 5,000 million ideas and being like, we should do this, we should do this, we should. And now it's very ironic running a company with ADHDers, because I'm like, oh my god, I know how they all think. They're all like, you should add this module, you should do this, you should. And like, and now for me being the manager, I'm like, I actually don't have capacity to breathe, and I can't take on everyone else's ideas. And also like, and especially knowing all of like, yeah, so it's a really ironic thing. But I would say for the individual, try your best to it's really hard. I fully get you, but like try to kind of write them all down. And particularly around work, like I've been in situations where I felt like I didn't want to share my ideas because I thought like they're not gonna get taken on, or like get shut down and stuff. So, but I would say to instead write them all down, and like to kind of, I think probably to share them, like to think about them. Actually, so we have this concept in coaching, it's called like river of ideas. Like write them down. The concept is that if you think of a river with fish in it, and you were going to take one of the fish out the river to eat it, like you could only take one at a time, otherwise the other ones would die whilst you're cooking that fish. So if you apply the same concept to the ideas, like if you take all the ideas out the river, then it's hard to do them all at the same time. And especially like writing them down, I've literally, one of my coaching clients has an action to like make a river on her wall of like fish with ideas. But writing them down helps you to do something with them. Try not to do one of my old companies that like set up a agency overnight, a website, and then they message me like you can't do that. Yeah, so basically writing them down, putting them somewhere, having a think about them, and then if you want to take one to the company or something, like do it in a way where like you kind of show that you thought about it a bit more, rather like if you're like me, you're like, I'm gonna do this thing, I'm gonna do it right now, bye, you can catch up with me later, see you. Try your best to plan it out and be like, show why you think it's a good idea, do your research, and ask for like the time to go through that, rather than like bombarding your person with like an email. I'm laughing because these are the things. It's right. I'm feeling the 360 now. But you know, like rather than sending loads and loads and loads of stuff like by email and then getting really upset because like they're not taking it on, and like then RSD jumps up and we're like, they're so mean. Why aren't they taking all my ideas on? Like, what's wrong with them? But like trying to do it, it's very ironic leading a team now because I'm like, I'll help you all run retreats and do group. Yeah, all of your ideas are welcome. And I'm like, oh my God, it's literally impossible to actually make everyone's ideas happen. So you gotta find the middle ground. And then if you're a team leader, manager, oh yeah, and also I think in general for the ADHD person, or like person with all the ideas, like yes, take the idea to the person if you like, but like actually, I would suggest that the majority of them you put into you, because like especially if you're working in an organization, like that organization has probably got their set like whatever work they need to do. Like I'll give you an example. Like in the last course I did, one of the coaches said, oh, I'd love to make like a course, an add-on to the course about like social media. I do have a bit of social media in there, but she was like, I would like to add this on, like do training for coaches on social media. And I was like, that is a good idea. But then I have over all of the coaches on the course wanting to add in modules, and then I have to pay them all. Like, oh my God. So, but I was like, actually, you should do this yourself. Like, why do you need to do it in my company? You can do it yourself. And the same, you know, like the ADHD book, I wrote it on the side of my law job, like, literally on the side of it. So I think take it all, like all the ideas that you've got. And I think that ties in really strongly with the RSD, because we're like, oh, I want to, like it'll be good if I do it in the company. Like in my old law job, I wanted to set up mental health circles within the job, and they said no. And now I do it as a job. So, there we go. Run my own company. But yeah, basically put it into yourself on the side, and like overcome the RSD about like you doing that. If you got ideas about like networks, I feel like a lot of people that are neurodivergent want to set up, like, bless them, we all want to set up like communities and support groups and events, and then the companies are like, no. The Met Police, they were like, we've got a community for every different kind of like neurodivergency of like thousands of police officers, and they're like, and they all want like funding and support and all of the stuff. So they're like, how do we help one community? So I think it's kind of like put into you, especially if you've got, the minute that I left my job, like, oh, it was quite amazing, because like I've got so much energy. I will happily work from 6 a.m. till 12 p.m. Not a good thing. Should not do. Don't work for 18 hours. But once I was free of all the restrictions of like the bureaucracy, that's why ADHD works so well, because I just am like fully unfettered. Like, oh, event, retreat, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So I think that for the individual, and like, yeah, I really do feel your pain, but like, like get a coach, like do it for you. Don't feel like that's your only option. Yeah, and now I can share what I would recommend for managers, if that's sorry. You hit on a point of like real passion to me, and like real pain. I was like, I really understand. But also, yeah, like do it for you, because the world needs it, and like don't wait for your, like if your company doesn't want the idea, like whatever, like do it yourself.
Just do it yourself.
Then they've missed out, right? It's like the blocking thing. Like if they don't want to learn, cool, do it. You'll wave at them from the top from Disney. You'd be like, could have had the mental health cycle at your company. and then for managers and leaders and these kind of people that are managing people like myself that are like, oh, I want to start a podcast. I think you should do this. I think you should like me.
Yeah.
I think it's finding setting really, really clear boundaries of like what is expected, like, you know, within the work hours, and then like help the person like find opportunities to do their, like, let them know that their ideas are like super, super welcome and valid, because yeah, their idea, when I've wanted to do things with ADHD works and I've got this team, I'm like, give me your ideas, you're great. I would like your brains, think of stuff for me. You know, it's like really making people feel that their ideas are like welcome,
Yeah.
and appreciated, because they are great and amazing, but it's kind of setting the expectations that like we can't do it all, that all these like bureaucracy and stuff, but maybe even like talking through the ideas with them of like, you know, if they wanted to really set up like a community or something, being like, okay, well, actually, like, I can go and ask my senior manager, HR person, like, which one is the most important to you? What would the outcomes be? What do you want to get out of it? But then also being like, kind of working with the person, being like, what could you do it by yourself? Like, do you want, like, you know, if you want to get all these things, like, you can do it on the side of your job. You don't have to do that, like, for this company, kind of how I just said, like, actually supporting people to achieve what they want to achieve, like, not necessarily just within the confines of the job, but like all of that energy, and then helping them to see opportunities within the company. Like, you know, I've got someone, like, we do group coaching, so I was like, cool, like, this person wants to do group coaching, they can do it here, like, so giving them like learning opportunities that will help them develop those ideas, and recognizing that they're real asset, really amazing, really welcome them, giving them my dad actually had this idea, like a blue sky thinking day, so like a time, like, so basically instead of like me sharing your ideas like in the team meeting, or like by email, like firing off emails, you could create like an ideas hour where people can bring their ideas to you, you know, and share them, like present them, like maybe like one idea at a time per person, but then you get the best ideas, right? And like you've set the time up, so then anything around that, you like do it in the container, do it in the ideas time, and then having like a little process around that. But I think that it's really interesting. I hope you don't mind me just babbling on about that, because I think it's something that comes up so much at work that people don't talk about, because it's a bit of a random thing to talk about. It's a bit, you would have to know someone with ADHD particularly to talk about this, which is why I was like, oh, I know what you mean. But I see a huge, when I coach people, like often it's because they have come up with lots of ideas, they go into a job, they're super like I want to do this and this and this, and then their managers or whoever are like, no.
No. Well, I mean, this is actually all touched on something that's that I've talked about previously, but it's quite linked. And I think if you have ADHD employees and you're a manager, so this kind of situation we're talking about, it's such a good way of encouraging them, and also encouraging them to work to their potential, not just to the potential that everyone thinks maybe we can get to, but it actually can tap into our just kind of innate strengths as well. It can tap into the hyper focus and doing the research, doing everything. And even if it starts out as like a personal project, it could lead to a company project that could actually in the end benefit the company. They just didn't want to put that initial like risk or investment in, which if you don't have unlimited money, which very few companies do, fair enough. And then, you know, that person gets that ownership and they get the encouragement. The thing that I'm struck with though is, and I don't know if you would agree, I feel like there's, with the management level, at least from my perspective in tech and in cyber, there's not much in the way of understanding of what ADHD is, and there's not much in the way of how to understanding of how to support people like that. And I think this is one of the areas where there needs to be real change, not just for the managers, but in how companies train the managers to deal with neurodivergent people and ADHDers, so that they can support. They you know, when they walk up and they're like, I have an idea, to make this a little bit easier, and so that we can all leave and go to the pub at 3 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock. And right now the managers, I think for the most part, are like, no, we're stuck in our ways. we have this process, and and then the employee will probably do it anyways, do it in their own time, and it actually is better, but they
And then
just
they
don't
have
have that
nothing to do for 2
encouragement.
hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when I did the Disney, I basically trained 200 mental health first aiders on ADHD coaching skills, and then gave them like workbooks and stuff around ADHD. And because instead, like that situation you just described, or the one before about ideas, like endless. And so I can coach individual managers like that, where like I can give them support around that specific situation. But the best thing that I think they can do is train in like actual ADHD coaching and like coaching people, working with people, because then they know it's not, that person hasn't made that suggestion because they want to go to the pub at 3 o'clock. Like they're not doing it because they don't want to be at work, and they're not doing it because they want to speed through their work and they don't care, or they're not coming up with those ideas because they don't want to do their job. Like they are actually doing it because they probably finished their job and they're bored, and they're like, but we could do all of these things really quickly. Like, then we can all do this other idea over there. And like the manager's like, but that's not how we like, which I now really get, being a manager myself. I know I can really understand that, because now having different employees, like, oh, it's really important that they all do, like when I had my job, I was like, oh, I want to do all these things, I want to do, and my manager was like, well, that's a lot of other people's areas. So I'm like, oh, but whatever, who cares? But like now I'm like, oh, actually, if I did someone else's job for them, they don't know what to do. And like I'm coaching someone now that came up, they told lots of people what to do, like they're a big manager, and over the weekend they did it all themselves. The manager was like, oh, I feel you, I do know that feeling. And so it's very ironic and interesting. So I think for managers to have that understanding and awareness, my manager was actually really good. She helped me, when I was like, oh, we would respond to these government consultations, and she said that I could respond to other ones in my own capacity. Like I was responding to like 2 of them for the job, and then I was like, oh, what about body image? Can I do this thing about models and blah, blah, blah? I was like, yeah, sure. Fine. But I think that can often be a big thought in people's heads. Like with the book, the ADHD book, I was so sure that I wouldn't be allowed to publish it, and obviously they did not care at all. But in my head, I was like, they're not gonna let me publish my book. Like it's gonna be like people never care as much as they think they do. But I think for managers having like I think that training, understanding, and like the coaching skills are so useful, because then like it doesn't matter the situation, but you've got the context, and like particularly in understanding a person, because I think that's probably the biggest challenge, is they're like, because they don't get that training, so then they just like might have their own assumptions, the person has their own assumptions, but instead of like actually understanding like this individual person, like for me, I might be very different to a different, like there's someone else might have ADHD, like very loud person. I was a very quiet person, but I was doing a month's worth of work in a day. Like, I'm done. Hello. Give me more work to do. And they were like, oh, what do we do with this girl? So it's very different for everyone. But if you've got those skills, you can kind of apply them to the, which I think is like management in general, right? But a lot of managers aren't trained on management. They're just promoted because they're good at their job, which might have nothing to do with people.
Yeah, and then that's the thing is, I mean, as we've been talking, I was thinking, I have a good example of kind of, I had a project that I wanted to do. I had something I wanted to do, and it was this podcast. Ironically enough, I'd been at VIA for probably, I think, about 3 weeks, a month, absolute tops, when I had this idea. I want to start a podcast. So I go to my manager and basically the rest of the team, and I was like, okay, I want to start a podcast on ADHD and cybersecurity. I don't know how to do this because I've never done a podcast before. And my manager's response was, do the research, find people that are interested in coming on as a guest speaker. Do you have enough content, blah, 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 all of these things. And I started the process, and then after about like a week of starting the process, I got bored. I was like, I'm not seeing the payoff yet. Um, and so I let it sit for probably 2 or 3 weeks, and then people started responding to me. There was interest growing. I'd made a couple posts on LinkedIn about, would people be interested in watching or listening to it, and that started to get some traction. My family, my girlfriend were all talking about it, and after like a 2 to 3 week hiatus, I was like, okay, I'm doing this, and started up the process again. And once I had, I think, 5 or 6 people lined up as guest speakers, um, and I'd written out the sheets with the questions and all that stuff to help guide the conversations. I'd done the research, blah blah blah. Then my company was like, okay, we will support you. Any tech we need to do this, we'll do it. That's one of those moments where I had an idea, and I figured like, oh, my company will help, and they did, but they didn't. They gave me the leeway and everything to do it for myself, and then once it was like, oh, this could actually be something, then they came in and they were like, okay, yes, we're happy to do this with you. But that's one of those moments where that's good management, isn't it? Where they're supporting someone with ADHD that has that idea, but like you
Yeah.
said, kind of delegating and saying like, do it on your own time, and then we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, because are they helping you with this podcast now?
Yeah. This
Thank
podcast
you. Thank you very much.
yeah.
John's manager. But did they? I have a question. Do they sign this podcast off? Like, do they have to listen to it before signing off?
So one of my colleagues does helps and does she doesn't help, she does all of the editing. So she listens to it, but I listen to it, and then we kind of discuss where to go from editing after that. So they are actually in the process.
Yeah. I had the reason I asked because your story. I was like, that's literally what I did in my job. Very similar. Then I wrote like a 15-page podcast policy. It's like, yeah, anyone can follow it. Anyone can do a podcast. But then, and I think again, it's a really good example of how like these ideas, we ADHDers are very amazing at ideas, and not so much
They report
at like
following
when they get
through.
boring. We're gonna follow. We might. Like, I can follow through, and then once I've done it once, I'm never bored now. So, I got all the work, like I did all the prep work, recorded the podcast, then I had to sign off the podcast, and I had to edit the podcast. And this bit, my brain was like, nah. And so all of the work that I'd done to set my beautiful podcast, I like recorded an episode, and then it was like, oh my god, that was very painful. I'm not doing it again. And so that was really and actually again, it's a really good example because like of thinking it through and like having that buy-in. Because if you're like, again, it's really hard because if you're the company, right, and say like me, ADHD works, like if one of my coaches were like, we do actually have a podcast, but if they wanted this up, I would just be like, you do. If you can handle all the admin, if you want to upload it all, fine, but obviously it can't have them going out and doing a podcast and like ADHD is not real, sucks. Then that would be a bit. So it's like these interesting balances, but then like showing that, I think probably what I would do if I was manager is like, if you can show me that you fought every step of the way through and you can find someone that wants to help you in the parts that like you don't want to do, like the sign off or the editing or the upload, like the admin, then cool. Because for me, it's like the best way to manage people with ADHD is to have ADHD yourself, because you're like, I know what your brain is like as well.
Yeah.
So it's like we can do all the fun bits, but those bits after can be really challenging. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing. It's really nice to talk about it because I think people, when I do the talk, like, the most corporate, like neurodiversity type thing, like, or they're like, oh, people with ADHD are so innovative, but it is that thing of like most corporations, they work in a very like, I couldn't believe it when I started my job and they had like a separate person doing social media, separate person doing a website, separate person doing podcast. I was like, but what do they do audit? I do the jobs of like 45 people now in my thing. So I was like, but then what do they do audit? So I think it's a really interesting like balance there of like those ADHD brains where like those ideas and things are amazing. So how do you like literally harness them? Like your company has done with this podcast of like finding the way to make it work, like setting, I think, like the boundaries around it and like making it realistic. Again, it's ironic because I do ADHD coaching now, but again, that's probably why I'm good at coaching other people. We find the boundaries around the containers. So like, okay, how do you know when you're gonna finish it? Then what are you gonna do? Like after you've done the first fun bit, then what? And then like setting up in that way. So yeah, I'm really lucky now because I've got Beth, who helps me do everything with ADHD Works. But poor Beth, like like, so I was like, I'm gonna do a podcast. We have the podcast here, but I was like, oh, I'm gonna do a podcast, put something on LinkedIn, and like said if anyone wants to be on it, it had like 50 to 100 people contact Beth. Like she woke up to all these emails being like, I want to come on the podcast. Like she didn't know existed, and then Beth has made she just went and turned it into a podcast, made it happen, stuff, and then we people booked in weekly for like a year, and then a few months online I was like, I can't be able to do this anymore, and then cancelled it. So that's a really nice thing about running your own company, is that you don't have so many people, like you're kind of accountable to yourself, and other people that rely on you. But like you learn as you go. But if you're working for someone, then you like or like, you know, if you're being managed by someone, you have to consider like their workload and the workload of your team and the workload of everyone else. And like, and I'm always like, I'll do it all, it's fine. But like then I'm like, will I actually do it all down the line? Like
I don't know. maybe we'll see when we get there.
Yeah, in the moment I'm like, yeah, I will happily do all of this, like it's fine. But then when you're in it, you're like, oh, my brain doesn't work anymore. Like you're a shiny thing over there, like no. And then that's where all the RSD comes, right?
Because then you're kind of questioning yourself, like, oh, you're questioning yourself, and you're kind of like, oh, I'm not good enough. And well, that's kind of imposter syndrome as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you're just kind of questioning, like, am I even good enough to be doing all of these different things? And you're just being too hard on yourself.
Yeah, and that's what comes at the start of like, you know, actually kind of setting yourself up or being kind to yourself. Like that's what's really nice now running the company. I'm like, okay, Leanne, like maybe next time we'll run it in a like slightly different way, but it's all right, it's fine. The world's not going to end because we have to cancel 75 podcasts. It's fine.
Yeah, and I mean, one thing you mentioned, you touched on very briefly, but I've been curious to get your kind of perspective on it. There are obviously people out there that don't believe ADHD is real. How they believe that, if they know anything about it, I don't know. In fact, I used to work with someone who diagnosed ADHD, primarily active. I still remember. Not gonna name blast or anything. Nice enough guy. One day, came into work. I was working at a bar at the time. It was really loud. It was noisy, and I went up to him because he had ADHD as well. And I was like, "Hey, I'm getting really overstimulated. I've been here for like 10 hours. I've had one 20-minute break. I need to step outside for like 20, 30 minutes because it's just too loud." And he was like, "Why?" And I was like, "Because I have ADHD and I'm overstimulated and I'm frazzled. I can't work. I can't function." And he just looked at me dead in the eyes and he was like, "No, you're fine. You don't have ADHD. It's not real."
Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh.
No, I know. That was my reaction as well. It was just kind of like an incredulous laugh because I know for a fact he had an ADHD diagnosis. So kind of what I'm getting at is like, when we inevitably get to the point, or the listeners get to a point where they meet someone in that professional setting that actually does say, no, it's not real, or argues against it. In your experience, how do you handle that? Like, what's the best way for someone to handle that situation?
I think, like all my answers, it depends on the situation. If it's like your situation, then I think definitely, I try not to advise people what to do, but I would say talk to HR. That's why I do think it's really important to have like policy. We've got a free policy on our website, but like policies around, I don't really like the word like telling your employee you've got ADHD in a kind of formal way, because there are like, this is a lot of what I do as well, because I fortunately worked in mental health and disability law, so I know all the law. But like there are lots of laws that get triggered when someone discloses a disability, which a disability only has to be a health condition that basically affects your ability to do normal day-to-day activities significantly negatively in contrast to your peers. The diagnostic criteria of ADHD is to have 2 or more areas of your life that are significantly negatively impacted for a long period of time. So guess what? Probably it's going to amount to disability. But interestingly, only the tribunal can tell you that, which is a long road. So companies are best to assume that everyone's got a disability if they say they have, and that's even without a formal diagnosis as well. Like, because that diagnosis doesn't change the fact that you've got a disability, right? Like, you were disabled before, you were disabled after. Like, so if you're in that situation, and like, I often talk to people that are like, I want to tell my employer after I pass my probation. I'm like, don't do that, do it now, because if they're going to fire you, then like, if they don't know that you've got ADHD, then they can't, what they're meant to do. Like, but if they do know, then they have to do adjustments, they have to take it into account, they need to do something to make sure that you are not disadvantaged in comparison to people that don't have ADHD that work there. Like your explanation that you've got there, like, obviously it sounded quite horrible in the first place. What I really love, the fact I really love, is that bullying is not illegal in the workplace, but discrimination and harassment is. So that's like, if basically someone can bully you and be like, go and stand in that corner, like, we don't like you. But if they said, I don't like that you've got ADHD, go stand in that corner because you've got ADHD, then that's discrimination.
That's illegal.
So like, that's why, again, like, I do a lot of training for companies, because like, they're really important legal obligations that if you've got people like this guy that talked to you that are like, not real, don't really care, go away, the companies can be sued. The discrimination damages are like unlimited, so it can cost them a lot of money, a huge amount of, and particularly like a failure, they call it a failure to make reasonable adjustments. So what you asked for was like a reasonable adjustment. You said, I want to go outside, and they were like, no. So that would be like a failure to make reasonable adjustments. And then afterwards he said, like, I don't believe in ADHD, you don't have ADHD, you're fine. Like, harassment, because he's saying, so, but yeah, so I'd say talk to HR. It's really scary to do that for people, because like, obviously it's kind of putting your hands up, but they will help you because they have to, because it's the law. So if they don't help you, then talk to a lawyer. Yeah, it's a really, really tricky area, and the tricky part of it is that a lot of companies are not trained on disability law, because of the fact, like, neurodiversity, for example, has only been talked about a lot in the last like 5 years in the company level. Even a year when I set up ADHD Works, there was literally no one on LinkedIn in particular that talked about ADHD. Like, it was just when I announced on LinkedIn, I literally felt like I was saying, hi, I'm a clown now. And now it feels like everyone I know on LinkedIn is like, oh, they're putting their bios, they're like, I'm neurodivergent, which is great, but
it's great,
also, like, although the individuals have caught up, the companies are still in the process, understandably, because it is really complicated, and it's really different for everyone. And I would say in general, like, on a more practical day-to-day level, like, if you've got people around you that are like making comments and stuff, and it's just, like, kind of saying, it depends on the situation of where you want to draw the line of being like, I don't agree with that, or communicating, like, when you're saying this thing, it's making me feel this way, I would prefer it if you don't. Put in writing, write it down, keep a log of when it happens, and keep a good tracking log of that, because then you can use that later on. And in like, my general advice, because for example, there was something last week on LinkedIn about, so it was like, this woman said autism is real because I've got people in my life with autism that can't talk.
I saw that.
She was like, ADHD isn't real. And you're like, oh, I was like, can't really pick, like, well,
no.
It's just like it's just something I really like. I really have a book about trauma, and so I'm like, you can't really pick. Well, basically, in general, kind of going back to the guy that blocked you, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is entitled to believe or do whatever they want. Fine, just let them have that. Like, it's very hard to change people, and why? Who says that what we say is right anyway? Like, when I was diagnosed with ADHD, I was like, that's not real. It's like, I've got a real problem. So I'm not really one to judge people that think it's not real, because that was me 5 years ago. And if you, again, like, I don't think people do it really to be malicious. I think it's just like their conditioning, their situation, whatever it is. You know, that person that you said has been diagnosed with ADHD. I actually went on a date with someone that had also been diagnosed with ADHD, and he was like, "It's not real," and I was like, "Well, maybe it's gonna work out," to be honest with you, because he didn't want to accept it. For a good year, I was kind of the same way as well. I was like, no, it's just my family were like, psychiatrists are just trying to make money out of you. Because and that is what is really annoying, because like I had to pay another £400 to see the psychiatrist to finish the diagnosis off. Then I had to pay £300 a month to get medication. So I was very much like, yeah, well, and the information available on the internet back then was just like nothing. There was no Instagram accounts on ADHD, like, and this only 5 years ago. But that's why I wrote that book, because I was like, I don't even what is I was like, I'm not a hyperactive person. Like, I would just wake up and sit on the computer for like 12 hours. But now I know it's like mentally hyperactive, and you know, I can pay attention really well, but just not on the
It's
stuff
the
I don't want to pay
inattentive type.
attention on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's the thing is, like, I got diagnosed when I was I think I was like maybe 12. I was 12 or 13. I'm 26 now. So um a good over half my life now I've had a diagnosis. But when I got diagnosed, I didn't know anything about ADHD. The internet hadn't caught up. Nothing was on there. And my mom, she really tried, but she didn't know anything about it either. So we thought at the time, when I got onto meds, we thought, oh, the medication's going to be a cure-all. It's going to fix everything. It didn't.
Mm-hmm.
There were still all of the core issues. It helped a lot of things, of course, but all of the core issues that I faced with my actual ADHD, the actual inattentiveness, got a little bit better. But the issues with with the RSD and imposter syndrome, and then the impulsiveness, that was all still there. And realistically, because I didn't know anything about it, got me into a lot of trouble when I was a kid, to the point where I remember, like, you were saying for the first year you had your diagnosis, you didn't really believe it. I stopped taking my meds because I was so adamant. I knew I had ADHD. I've never questioned that I didn't or did, but I was so adamant that I could be normal, in quotes, and that I didn't need my meds, that I stopped taking them. And the outcome of that was I nearly failed out of my undergrad. I think it was by half a percentage point I got my undergraduate degree because I stopped taking my meds.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've just been like, no, I definitely have ADHD.
I'm like, I take the medication. It seems to work.
Yeah.
Dark out.
It's like, and it was after that point that's where I was like, I'm gonna start actually learning about it, and trying to figure out what it means for me and what it means for other people. And then obviously when we connected, I was like, this isn't just about me now. I want to help other people. I want to give people these resources, but because if I'm struggling, then there's obviously more people struggling out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like being
Yeah.
able to show the range of your experience. Exactly. If you go back to the first thing you said to me about the companies, it's like you can read something off Google and we're like, oh, so it's ADHD, but like the range of your experience, like, for me, so not, if I see if someone's like, I don't think ADHD is real, I'm like, cool, have a great life.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, good luck to you. Really helped me personally, but fine. Yeah, because I've been that person like myself, so it's kind of like you have empathy and then you can let it go. But like, I think it's really about taking responsibility for ourselves and being like, okay, well, actually, what do I want to do with this knowledge? And like, is there anything I want to, like, the self-awareness and self-reflection and choosing the kind of life you want to live, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of people out there that either have ADHD and that have the diagnosis, or have it and don't have the diagnosis, that hopefully are going to be listening. And I think the best thing for me to say right now, I would say, if you have the diagnosis, if you don't have the diagnosis, if you feel like you have it, that's fine. That's great. There's nothing wrong with you. Ian's got it. I've got it. Every other guest speaker that has been on this podcast has ADHD. We're all vastly different. My inattentiveness means that I forget things every once in a while. Yours could be different. The other guest speakers, they're totally different. It doesn't look the same for any two people. That's okay.
Mhm.
You still have it. It's valid. And yeah, I don't know what else to say to that. All the power.
Yeah.
It's
Read
cheesy. I know it's
ADHD A to
cheesy.
Z.
And read the book. I still need to read your book as well.
Oh wow.
It's been sitting in my Amazon shopping basket for about 3 or 4 months because I keep forgetting to buy it.
That's okay. Don't worry. Like I'm seriously so amazed when someone tells me they've read it. I'm like, really?
I have meant to
Wow.
read it.
Yeah, it amazes me. I'm like, oh, you read that whole. Wow. I'm like, cool. Yeah.
I'll be honest. I keep I've been reading through some Star Wars books because I'm a massive Star Wars fan.
Read that. Don't worry.
Yeah, and so every time I finish it, I'm like, I'm gonna buy Leanne's book, then I'm gonna read it, and then I'm like, I just want to finish this last book in the trilogy. But I only have 100 pages left in the last book in the last of the last trilogies. So once that's done, I'm gonna get your book and I'm gonna read it,
Well,
and it's gonna
read it if
change.
you want to read it.
No, I want to read it. I've been wanting to read it for a while. Anyways, I think
I'm not a very
this
good
is.
salesperson.
Read if you want to read it. I don't care. Do what you want to do.
I make like 10 a book, so it's really not.
Is that it?
I make 10% of the royalties, which are very little. So.
Wow, 10p, but that's insane though.
Self-publish your books. If you're gonna write books, self-publish it. No, yeah, it's a story for another day.
Yeah, I'd be
But
interested to
it's
hear
more
that.
like it's nice to like why I wrote that book because I was in exactly that position of like now what do I do? So that's pretty
Yeah.
much why I wrote it to help people figure out what that means to them. So hopefully it helps them if they. I wrote it for myself to figure out what it means for me, and I did that job. So hopefully it'll help other people if they want the same.
I've thought about writing a book a few times and I've never gotten around to it. Maybe it's time I start writing.
Yeah,
It would just be incomprehensible gibberish, though, I think.
that's what my book is.
Did you plan it out at all? Did you like make a plan, or did you just kind of throw yourself in and like, yeah, let's see what happens?
I just did that. It's an A to Z, so each chapter is a different title. That's it.
26 chapters?
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Very stressful, very long, very hard to write. I'm in the middle of writing another one actually about ADHD coaching. So that one's fun. So I'm on chapter N. So pray for me that I make it to the end because it's really hard.
I can't wait to read that one as well then. I'm going to buy both of them at the same time.
Good plan, good accountability there. Okay, give me a good end goal now. I'm like, oh, now I can do it. All right, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for coming on. And if is there any last words you'd have for all the listeners and viewers and everything else?
I think last words. I think if you're struggling, like try to basically do that thing we said at the start. Just like know that you're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You're okay. Like you just think differently to most people, whether you have got a diagnosis or not. If ADHD resonates with you, then it resonates with you. Just actually figure out what you want to do with that information. Like what change does that mean for you? Definitely just like understand what it means to you and like remember like it's just a part of who you are. It's not who you are. It's part of what makes you you, which is a pretty great person.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Leanne, thank you again for coming on today. Thank you for your time. And yeah, I just can't thank you enough for everything that we've spoken about, everything that you've done. I'm going to read your book. And yeah, I'm just really happy to have had you on. It's been a great conversation. I hope everyone else gets something out of it. So for everyone else, this has obviously been Hyperfocus Hour, brought to you by myself and by a resource. Obviously, Leanne Maskell has been the guest speaker. Do not forget to do a like, follow, subscribe, all those things. And we shall see you next time.